4:37. I'm just rehearsing the boys.
Religious architecture.
It's Morrison on Radio 1 at Scott Mills at 4:37.
Good afternoon to you, Bill Oddis.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Right, here we go. He's a miserable git.
Instantly.
Stephen?
BBC Radio 4.
10 seconds, okay.
M25, Brisbane.
So get everybody in position, please.
Wait.
Quiet for a line,
My
Roger.
parents will restless.
Keep it tight.
Take one.
BBC National Orchestra of Wales. Steph.
Okay.
The community secretary.
We're passing the ball too much.
Connie whispered to her.
Nice and quiet then.
It's 4:37 and I'm chained to a radiator.
You can no longer buy your TV license at the post office. Instead, you can get one at over 16,000 local shops, from convenience stores to petrol stations, wherever you see the PayPoint sign. For more information, call 0800 328 2020 or visit tvlicensing.co.uk.
In the future, we could lose our cars and our cheap flights as carbon taxes become reality. One family tries living without for a year.
Thank God this year is nearly over.
Go green or else. Panorama, tomorrow at 8:30 on BBC One.
The news now on BBC One with Michelle Hussein.
New plans to shake up welfare. Some unemployed could have their benefits cut. Ministers say the private sector may be drafted in to help find jobs. 2 more British soldiers are killed in southern Afghanistan. Ming's big speech to the Liberal Democrats with mixed messages over power sharing with Labour. And a 7-goal thriller at Upton Park as West Ham fight for their Premiership survival. Good evening. The long-term unemployed could, as a last resort, have their benefits cut if they don't accept help to get a job. The Work and Pensions Secretary, John Hutton, has told the BBC that while he doesn't want to reduce benefits, jobless people will have to take up offers of support towards getting back to work. It's all part of a major shake-up of the welfare system, as Mike Sargent explains.
We're supposed to be some of the hardest working people in Europe. The economy's been generating millions of jobs and hundreds of thousands have come from abroad to earn a living here. But too many in Britain still find themselves out of work and on welfare. Shuan Leach has experience of being a lone parent living on benefits. She went back to work, but says it was then even harder to make ends meet.
When people come off income support, they lose free school meals and entitlement to free prescriptions and free dental treatment. So there are a lot of costs that have to be factored into going back to work, and I think this is a major problem.
You can hear stories like hers all over the country. There are 4 million people in Britain out of work and living on benefits. The government's big idea to solve the problem is a much greater role for the private sector in finding jobs and, crucially, keeping people in work. That could mean things like paying off their debts, providing more intensive and longer-term training, even helping people to smarten up for interviews, perhaps paying for a haircut or a new suit.
If people don't accept help and advice, then ultimately they could see their benefits reduced or withdrawn altogether.
The status quo, I think, is not defensible. We should be prepared to have an open mind about reform, but it will be based not on the principle that the first thing you do is cut people's benefits. You should never do that until that's the last resort. What you should do is provide the active help and support to get those people back to the labour market.
The Conservatives say the government's tried and failed to reform welfare many times before, but the Tories won't necessarily oppose these plans.
If it passes the crucial test of helping getting people into work more effectively than the old bureaucratic systems have done, then yeah, we'd give it a sympathetic hearing.
In the report due out tomorrow, a controversial proposal aimed at lone parents is expected, forcing them to work once their youngest child reaches 11 rather than the current age of 16.
We think it would be a real mistake to start now cajoling lone parents, even those with older children, into jobs when it's just not right for them.
Greater involvement of the private sector will also be resisted by some, but the government says radical options are needed to get millions of people off welfare and into work. Mike Sargent, BBC News.
2 British soldiers have been killed in Afghanistan, bringing the number of troops who've died there to 50. The soldiers who've not been named were from 29 Commando Regiment, Royal Artillery. They died in a rocket attack in the Sangin area of Helmand province. Alistair Leathed has sent this report.
It's been another violent week in Helmand province. British troops have been clashing daily with the Taliban. They've used thousands of rounds of ammunition and rockets. Sangin has been the main battleground in the last few days, and it was here that the 2 men from 29 Commando Regiment Royal Artillery were killed. Their position was struck by a Taliban rocket. 50 British troops have now died since the war began in 2001. The commander of the UK task force to Afghanistan said in a statement, "The loss of 2 of our men in one incident is a deeply saddening blow. I would like to sincerely convey my thoughts and condolences to the men's families and friends at this very difficult time. Our prayers are with them." And there was more violence today. A suicide bomber struck an American convoy in the east of the country. But it was what happened in the aftermath that raised emotions. The US forces opened fire. They said in self-defense after being ambushed. But all the crowd saw was civilians being killed and injured.
The foreign troops have come for the destruction of Muslims. They have not come here for the good of the people. They want to destroy this country.
With every civilian killed, more hearts and minds are lost. Preventing this is something the British troops in the south face every day. The intensity of the fighting has certainly been increasing, and there's a feeling here that that will continue in the coming weeks. A spring offensive is widely expected from the insurgents, but NATO forces here insist it's they who will be taking the fight to the Taliban. Alistair Leathed, BBC News, Kabul.
There's still no word on the fate of 5 Britons feared kidnapped in Ethiopia. The group's believed to have been abducted in the desert near the border with Eritrea. British officials are in northern Ethiopia to try to secure their release. Adam Minot is the only Western journalist with them. He's just sent us this exclusive report.
Another night has fallen in northern Ethiopia, and still no word of the 5 Britons missing now for 4 days. Intense diplomatic activity is going on at all levels to try to locate and recover the party. A team of Foreign Office officials arrived here in Bihale tonight and went into talks with local administrators. We were not allowed to hear what was being discussed. Diplomatic activity is intense, but there's no word yet on any progress. British officials are keen to get to the site of the kidnap. It's about 30 miles from here, up the road, north towards the Eritrean border. We're the first Western journalists to have travelled into the rocky, hostile Afar region since the kidnap. We bumped along a winding road through the mountains, a route normally used by camels transporting salt from mines deep in the Afar desert. The arid terrain brought home how extremely difficult it will be to locate the missing Britons. There was some good news today. A group of French holidaymakers, who it was feared had also been kidnapped, made it out of the Afar desert. Nothing had been heard of them for 2 days, but they turned up in the town of Mekele, safe and well, and very relieved.
On our side, there was no problem. Nothing happened as regards the health, security, or whatsoever. As you can see, the group is safe now with me.
The safe return of the French party has underlined growing concerns about the 5 kidnapped Britons and the Ethiopians who were travelling with them. Adam Minot, BBC News, Bihale in northern Ethiopia.
A schoolgirl seriously ill in hospital tonight after being swept away by a river on Dartmoor. The teenager was believed to be in a party of 10 when she fell into the river at Wallabrook in Devon. She was airlifted to hospital by a Royal Navy helicopter. Anna Thomas reports.
The teenage girl, who hasn't yet been named, was reported missing by a member of her group shortly after 2 o'clock this afternoon. They'd lost sight of her when she was swept away in the river after around an inch of rain fell in just 12 hours. Soon after, she was spotted by a Royal Navy search and rescue helicopter, which happened to be at the nearby Eden project in Cornwall. Despite having spent 20 minutes in freezing water, rescuers were able to resuscitate the girl.
The party consisted of a group of 10 teenagers between 14 and 16 years, and one of the girls sadly fell into the water and subsequently has been rescued by a Royal Naval Air Service helicopter and taken to Derriford Hospital, where she's very poorly as we speak.
The teenagers, all thought to be around 14 years old, were training for the 10 Tours expedition later in the year, in which they'll compete to trek across Dartmoor's unforgiving terrain in groups made up only of young people. Anna Thomas, BBC News.
And 2 people have died after being washed off a harbour wall in Cornwall. It happened in heavy seas and gale-force winds at Mullion Cove. The 2, thought to be a man and a woman, were taken to a hospital in Truro. Sir Ming Campbell's keynote speech to the Liberal Democrat conference in Harrogate has been overshadowed today by behind-the-scenes confusion among some of his most senior aides. They were giving opposite interpretations about whether Sir Ming was or was not supporting the idea of a coalition with Labour. So what did he mean? Here's Vicky Young.
Asserting his authority, that's what Ming Campbell's friends say he's done this weekend. Yesterday he saw off a revolt over nuclear policy. Today he warned rebels in his party that he'd lead from the front. But he began with a swipe at the Tory leader, David Cameron.
It's not your youthful indiscretions that worry me, it's your adult misjudgments. Teenage kicks are one thing, but you've got to grow up sometime. And it's time you admitted your mistakes, particularly your support for the war against Iraq.
Comparing Tony Blair to a man in a supermarket with 2 minutes to go till closing, he turned his fire on Gordon Brown instead.
This man, who has written the cheque since 1997, has had unparalleled influence within Whitehall. Why on earth should we believe that Britain will be better governed if he simply moves from number 11 Downing Street to number 10?
And he set out 5 tests for Mr. Brown. Could he be less authoritarian on crime, give more power to local communities, act on climate change and poverty, and be more independent of America on foreign policy? And Ming Campbell told his party to be ambitious.
I tell you this now. I am not content to lead a party whose sole purpose is opposition. My clear direction, our clear direction, must be government.
A senior Liberal Democrat official has suggested that this speech sets out the broad areas that might form the basis for power sharing with Labour if there's a hung parliament at the next election. And he said that proportional representation, a key principle for Lib Dems, was no longer a deal maker or a deal breaker. That would be a huge shift in policy, but with MPs close to Ming Campbell saying that's not what his speech was about, the conference has ended in confusion rather than celebration. Vicky Young, BBC News, Harrogate.
Now with news of a thrilling game in the Premiership and all the rest of the day's sport, here's Mary Rhodes. Mary.
Michelle, thank you very much. Good evening. Well, West Ham were in desperate need of a win against Tottenham today. Despite leading 2-0 at half-time, they went on to lose 4-3. It leaves West Ham at the bottom of the table. Well, you can see all the goals and highlights on Match of the Day too, but here's Ollie Foster with a taster.
He's made a really good save. West Ham blew it, and the bubble has now surely burst on their season. And how it hurt. They were 2 goals up against Tottenham. Their troubled Argentine Carlos Tevez had come good, his first West Ham goal, and he was instantly transformed into the saviour. But just as he disappeared into the crowd, so West Ham disappeared in the second half. Lee Bowyer upended Aaron Lennon, and Jermaine Defoe gave Spurs hope. And they had a bit more than that when Timu Tainio polished off a slick move. But the real drama was reserved for the end of this incredible match, as West Ham players, fans and manager suffered every emotion. Surely a winner with 5 minutes to go. A Spurs equaliser in the 89th minute, and then defeat 5 minutes into injury time. It's been an eye-opener for Alan Kirbishley in his brief time at the club. He saw it all in those last 10 minutes, but unfortunately not the light at the end of the tunnel. Ollie Foster, BBC News.
Well, for the rest of the goals and reaction from Upton Park, along with highlights from Bolton's game against Blackburn, join Adrian Charles on BBC Two at 10:30 tonight. Now in the Scottish Premier League, Charlie Adams scored twice to give Rangers a 2-0 win at Hibernian. Both goals came from free kicks, although Hibs keeper Simon Brown won't be happy with the part he played in Adams' second goal. Rangers are now 7 points ahead of Aberdeen in the race for second place in the table. Great Britain finished top of the medals table at the European Indoor Athletics Championships. UK Athletics had predicted 6 medals for the team. They finished with 10. British medals have been rather hard to come by in the past few seasons, so it was a morale-boosting 3 days in Birmingham. Here's Selina Hinchcliffe.
Jason Gardner's wife, Nancy, is a day overdue. His second child, a son, is expected any minute. So the British athletics team will thank her for hanging on for an extra 6.5 seasons. That's all it took for Gardner to take a record 4th indoor title in a row.
This meant so much to me. I mean, I wanted to do the most out there, I really did. I had to really just trust in myself, my coach, and really graft after my disappointed performances due to illness.
With silver for his teammate Craig Pickering as well, the team surpassed all expectations and broke their previous best of 9 medals at these championships. Martin Bernard won bronze in the high jump, and the final 2 medals came in the 400-metre relays. The women with bronze, the men a fortunate gold, because Germany were disqualified for pushing over the Russian on the final bend. British athletics seems to have found its feet at these championships.
This is just a rung on the ladder, and no one should think that we underestimate the challenge that we've got ahead. But it's a nice rung, and perhaps people can now believe in the miracle of medals in 2012.
The World Championships this summer will provide a more accurate yardstick as to where the sport is, but it's certainly heading the right way. Selina Hinchcliffe, BBC News.
So, on a positive note for once, that's it from me for tonight. Michelle.
Mary, thanks very much. The news continues now on BBC News 24 with more on the rescue operation on Dartmoor after a schoolgirl was swept away in a river. Now let's get the latest on the weather front with Susan Powell.
Thanks very much, Michelle. After a grey and wet end to the weekend, it looks like there should be at least something a little brighter on offer for most of us tomorrow. But by this time tomorrow night, we could well be back at square one with another wet and windy spell sweeping its way across the UK. And in the week ahead, one of the things I think we'll be watching out for is an increased risk of flooding. This is the curl of cloud that brought us Sunday's rain. This is the slightly clearer slot we'll be in for tomorrow. But towards the west, another area of low pressure, which will be sweeping its way across us through Monday night into Tuesday. Overnight tonight, though, we clear away our persistent rain into the North Sea from eastern areas of the UK. Towards the west, though, still more showers packing in on the breeze, and they'll continue to do so well on into Monday, but at least there will be some brighter spells in between them in contrast to Sunday. By the end of the day, though, thicker cloud will flood in from the west, the first signs of that area of low pressure approaching. So this is the way we see Scotland at 3 p.m. Still some sunshine in the east here, but towards the west the cloud arriving and the wind strengthening and some rain knocking on the door too. For northern England, becoming increasingly grey. Also East Anglia and the southeast not faring too badly though on Monday. I think some of our driest and brightest weather on offer here, but slide towards the west and we're back under the sullen skies for the southwest of England, for Wales too. And notice the winds are lifting up. Even by the end of the afternoon, it'll be very wet and windy across Northern Ireland, and then that very wet and windy weather will affect all parts of the UK overnight into Tuesday. The good news is it will sweep away pretty readily during the day to allow some brighter skies behind, but it'll be worth keeping an eye on those flood warnings.
Susan, thanks very much indeed. The main news tonight, the long-term unemployed could have their benefits cut under new plans to shake up the welfare system. That's the latest. There will be news throughout the night over on News 24. From us though, good night.
Back to our film next here on BBC One. Cold Mountain continues in a moment.
Ever wondered what your meat goes through? See an animal killed,
cooked and eaten. Kill it, cook it, eat it. Starts tomorrow on BBC Three at 10:30 with the story of beef.
Ta-da! She's having a divorce party.
So glad to see you. I've been planning this dinner for weeks. I want it to be perfect.
For what it's worth, I never thought you two were quite right for each other.
Don't understand. You're my best friend. Best friends don't do that.
Hotel Babylon. Check in Thursday at 9 on BBC One.
The journey home continues now on BBC One as we return to Cold Mountain.